Video games are one of the most profitable entertainment industries on the planet, and a lot of that money comes from players dropping $60 to play the newest AAA titles. When someone throws down that much money to try something new though, they want the game to be worth the money, and the quickest way to make someone feel shortchanged is to give them a short experience. Now, of course, short games can be worth full price, and often a tighter experience is better than a bloated one, but you can't leave the player with the lasting feeling of, oh, is that it? As a result, we have compiled a list like this before, but this version is taken from the games viewers mentioned in the comments, so chuck more suggestions down there below. We might even get to do another follow-up in the future. I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 video games that were too damn short, Commenters Edition. Number 10, Rage 2010, recommended by CHADWICK CREECH, who said, "Rage, I love that game, and just when it felt like it was really about to start, no. The cinematic plays, and that's the end of the game." The first Rage game was supposed to be the next big thing from id Software, taking place on a post-apocalyptic Earth that transformed the planet into a wasteland reminiscent of the Fallout series and films like Mad Max. It started well enough, but when many players hit the climax some hours later, they thought it was just another cinematic taking them to a new area. The story had just gotten interesting, and the gameplay finally properly exploded, but then, no, that was it, and players couldn't continue the story any further because the story was over. The single-player campaign for Rage averages out at a little over 11 hours, which may seem like a long time compared to some of the other games on this list, but for Rage, it was just too short. The game offers a massive open world players can explore, and being able to kill off the main story in such a short amount of time was disappointing to tons of people, many of whom got through it in only 8 hours, hitting credits just as the story got interesting. Number 9, Infamous Second Son, recommended by Davian Elliott, who said, "You forgot Infamous Second Son." I like it, succinct. Infamous Second Son is the third title in the Infamous series, and like its predecessors, the game did well with critics and fans, offering a vast open world where players are encouraged to explore the city of Seattle as the character's superpowers develop. The actions and choices the player makes determines how the story will play out, but most average players will find themselves reaching a credits scene relatively quickly in around 10.5 hours. If you play the DLC and knock out all the side quests, then you can tack on a little under 5 hours on top of that, making the total playtime for a completionist max out at just shy of 15 hours. Not only was the game beaten far too quickly for most players though, but the final power you attain has been described as worthless by more than a few fans. Getting to that point and finding yourself not only underwhelmed with your ending power, but also with barely any way to use it in the endgame, left players feeling like they'd maxed the game out way too early. Number 8, Splinter Cell Conviction. Most of the games in Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell series have been incredible hits, and the fifth one is no exception. Splinter Cell Conviction was released in 2010, letting players once again take control of Black Ops agent Sam Fisher, this time with a higher focus on action. One of the biggest complaints gamers had about the title though was that it only contained 11 story missions. And none of those missions took a great deal of time to complete either, and for those who played the story mode in co-op with a buddy, the game was even shorter. If someone sat down and attempted to play just the main story for the game without getting distracted by anything else, they would be sitting for just over 7.5 hours before hitting credits, according to its How Long to Beat page. Adding all of the extras only takes the player to the 12-hour mark, which is still nothing compared to the other games with the Tom Clancy label. In fact, Splinter Cell Conviction stands as the shortest Tom Clancy game released as a AAA console title, and even the games for the handheld systems average several hours longer. Number 7, Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance, recommended by David MEYER, who said, "How about Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance? Absolutely amazing game, but I want more of that sweet, sweet blade mode action." Me too, David. Me too. Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance hit all the consoles in 2013, and the game stood apart from the usual fare found in the Metal Gear franchise. Revengeance brought a ton of action by favouring sword fighting over stealth, with combos and counterattacks such as Zandatsu taking the primary focus of gameplay. There's actually a relatively good reason the game is so short though. It was rushed through development, so the devs focused instead on players going through the game multiple times on increasingly harder difficulty settings. By doing this, the game maintains high replay value, but for players who prefer more of a one-and-done experience, they found the title lacking. An average player can navigate the story in just over 7 hours, but some have complained about beating the game in just 5. Number 6, RYSE: Son of Rome. recommended by XAVIERTDC. RYSE Son of Rome was released as a launch title for the Xbox One in 2013. 7 years on, the graphics are still pretty exceptional, and the detail of the era is represented well as the player takes on the story of Marius Titus as he witnesses the murder of his family at the hands of barbarians. As an adventure hack and slasher though, most players would assume they'd be sitting down for a good 10 to 15 hours or more to complete everything. But again, according to HowLongToBeat.com, the average time needed to beat the main campaign is just 6.5 hours. As XAVIERTDC explained, if you get the game free as a Games with Gold edition, you can enjoy the hell out of it, but it's not the kind of experience you want to front load to convince someone they've made the right decision getting a next-gen console at launch. Number 5. Mirror's Edge, recommended by Brian Simon 2. Mirror's Edge was first released in 2008 for the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3, and the game was something of a sleeper hit. The title is set in a futuristic dystopia where a network of runners act as couriers who transmit messages while evading government surveillance. It was an awesome experience that came out of nowhere, but most players popped the game into their consoles and then finished it before going to bed that very same day. The game clocks in with an average playtime of only 6 hours and 21 minutes. And that includes all of the trial and error gameplay required to successfully navigate across rooftops throughout the city, which, if you're like me anyway, you'll be falling off all the goddamn time. Mirror's Edge was rebooted in 2016 as Mirror's Edge Catalyst, which had additional content, bringing the average story completion time to 8 hours and 34 minutes. Still though, now the game was open world, so it was still lacking in its own way. Number 4, Titanfall 2, recommended by Michael. The first Titanfall game was released without a single-player campaign, and while the game mechanics were impressive, plenty of fans felt as if they didn't get a complete experience. Fortunately, the devs were paying attention, so in 2016, EA released a sequel, complete with its very own single-player campaign. The gameplay was just as great as it was in the first one, and the multiplayer experience was enhanced for the series' second outing as well. Of course, it wouldn't land on this list without a very specific complaint, and you can guess what the problem was with Titanfall 2. Sure, it had a single-player campaign this time around that the fans were clamoring for, and some consider it one of the generation's best, but it was way too short. For the average player, completing the main story only required a little more than 6 hours, but the ones who had honed their skills in multiplayer beforehand often completed the game in half the time. A lot of players may have wanted more from the campaign, but plenty more was just happy to have the option in the first place considering how the first game went. And like I said, it is awesome, so definitely check it out. Number 3, Resident Evil 3, recommended by Martin Sullivan, who said, "Add Resi 3 to the list. I cleared it in 6 hours of my playthrough. Great game, but over so quickly." The original Resident Evil 3 Nemesis had a short enough playthrough at around 6.5 hours, but the latest remake rocks out at a meager 5 hours and 54 minutes. So, somehow 2 decades went by and the game lost an average playtime of around 44 minutes. And for me personally, it was even more drastic, as I only had 4 hours clocked by the time the game was over, and yes, I was taking my time and getting all the secrets. Everyone says that I wasn't doing that. I really was. I was really trying to save at every moment, and I still blitzed it. I guess I'm just so good. Anyway, the original was always short, but because Resident Evil 3 actually takes out certain sections from that original, it's still been seen as a disappointment. The game didn't make full use of the source material, and the credits roll way faster than the average player would expect. Still, the 2020 remake is graphically gorgeous, and Jill Valentine is almost worth the price of admission alone. Number 2, Zone of the Enders, recommended by TEARDOWNGENESIS, who said, "Zone of the Enders, I love the game, but it's like 1 to 2 hours. Zone of the Enders is a genuine cult classic franchise, but was sadly cut short after 2 stellar main games. Even worse, like the series as a whole, the first game was over way too quickly, and HowLongToBeat.com lists the average time needed to beat the main story at 1 minute under 5 hours. Adding the extras only kicks in about half an hour, and that's about it. In its defense though, the game almost plays like an arcade title, so a player plopping down on the couch and finishing it way too quickly does kinda make sense. Still, some people knocked out the whole game in about 3 hours, and that's without rushing. Fortunately, Zone of the Enders has a great, albeit short storyline, and it's definitely worth seeking out if you've never touched it before. Number 1, Godzilla Save the Earth, recommended by Rico J. Amado, who said, "I remember way back when Godzilla Save the Earth came out. At last, a good Godzilla game in 3D for the PlayStation 2. A couple months to fight a few weird minigames and one abrupt no ending later, and seriously, that was it." Godzilla Save the Earth is a fighting game released on the Xbox and PlayStation 2 back in 2004. As you might have guessed, the game puts you in control of monsters who slug it out while destroying cities like they're made of Lego. The game has a story mode you can play through as well as you beat the crap out of monsters, but a huge chunk of the plot was dumped before the game was published. Fights last up to about 5 minutes, which is actually quite long for a fighting game, but the bulk of the story only plays out if you beat the game on expert mode, which triggers a cutscene of Space Godzilla getting trapped in a wormhole. Godzilla Save the Earth received generally positive reviews and players enjoyed the title, if only for a short time. For most gamers, it takes only about 3 hours to beat the main storyline in the game, and if you add in all the extras, it can go for maybe a little under 4 hours, but that's it. Still, at least it's not the PS4 Godzilla game, which was not only short, but also potentially the worst thing of all time. And no, there's no hyperbole there. So that's our list. Want to know what you guys think in the comments below of the viewers' suggestions here, and leave your own if you think some of these should have been swapped out. Either way, while you're down there, can you give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to WhatCulture.com for more lists and news like this every single day. Even if you don't though, I've been Josh, thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.